What is up, everybody? Welcome to yet another episode of Father Dynasty. I am your fatherly host, Chew, here in the manhole, here to talk a little fatherhood and a little Dynasty fantasy football. And I got a special guest today. You know him, you love him. If you don't know him, you should. If you don't love him, you will. He's my fearless commissioner, fellow daddy on the channel, Daddy Daly. How you doing, buddy?
Doing good. I can't remember. It's been a little while since I've been on, so I know we've talked about this before, but got our kitchen back fully functioning, which is we went 52 days without that. I told you a little bit before we started recording. We're sleep training with Emma. It's lawn season, so been really diving headfirst into taking care of the lawn. I love doing that, so things are going well.
I got to ask, I know having visited you, I know it's been a while ago now. Has the HOA been giving you any shit?
You know, it's funny. We got a letter from the HOA today, and I was like, we wondered if it was going to be, ever since that happened, you know, our transgressions of the past happened. We always kind of joke about whenever we see something in the mail from the HOA, but it was just a ballot to vote for the board this year. So
get yourself on the board.
Yeah. Megan talks about that every year. She's like, how many more years until you're actually on that board? And I don't know if I can get involved in that level of neighborhood corruption, but who knows?
Hey, that's right. I will say that does sound like a Bill Daly thing to do, so I don't see why you shouldn't do it.
But, yeah, it's 100% a Bill Daly thing. I think he actually was on the HOA board in the neighborhood we grew up in. So,
as he should. Well, you will be on the HOA board of this NFL draft evaluation today, and looking at the draft this year, I did not go back too deep to try and figure out how many times this has happened, but there are 8 teams that have 2 picks, and I'm trying to think of the last time that ever happened, because I know there's usually a little bit of trading before the draft, and then within the draft itself, maybe someone trading up. That's usually within the first round to sooner, not from the second round to the first round. And I know probably a lot of it had to do with a lot of these big picks or big trades with Devontae Adams and some of those guys, but just to run through it here, we've got the Lions have 2-32, the Texans have 3-13, the Jets have 4-10, Giants have 5-7, Eagles have 15-18, although that was after a trade with the Saints. The Saints have 16-19 after the trade with the Eagles. Packers have 22-28, and then the Chiefs have 29-30. So just taking a look at your board, I don't know if you've done like just a full-fledged mock draft or just looking at some prop bets for where you think people are going to land, but what are maybe some key picks or what you see as like pivot points in the draft for, you know, if a certain team does this, that'll kind of change the landscape of what everybody else does?
Yeah, I think overall, like it's a unique draft in that, like you said, I don't think I've seen this many teams with 2 picks. I don't know if I've ever seen a draft where a team has 2 consecutive picks like the Chiefs have. It probably has happened, but I just don't remember it. And didn't the Eagles also have consecutive picks until that? I think maybe until they had a trade recently. Maybe
pretty sure it's either that or like pick somebody else and then them again. Like it was still pretty close. Yeah.
Yeah. So overall, it's just like one of the more wide open drafts that I feel like I can remember. Like every year, it's almost, especially from a betting market perspective, the number 1 pick is always just like this massive favorite. Because it seems to be widely accepted. And I think most of the volatility is just driven by the lack of high-end talent at the quarterback position. Because usually there's 1 or 2 guys that everyone's like pretty sure is going to be a regular starter or has all the tools to be a regular starter or above. And we just don't have that, I don't think, this year. You can talk yourself into a couple of these quarterbacks, but it's pretty clear that we're not in the same category as we were last year with, 5 quarterbacks that everyone was pretty set on and okay with. So,
yeah,
I think it's the pivot point is really just going to be when that first quarterback goes, because the longer I think that a quarterback sits without getting taken, it just kind of makes teams that maybe were prepared to sit and wait because they didn't think somebody would be available. Like are the Steelers, if they see Malik Willis drift past 10, are they going to sit and wait until he falls to them at 20, or are they going to get aggressive and go ahead and trade up? Because I really think that it's probably unlikely that we see many teams in the top 10 trade out because most of them need offensive linemen in some regard. And that's where the strength of this draft is on the defensive side of the ball and the offensive line. So I really think once we get past pick 10, we're going to see some volatility. We're going to see a lot more trades past pick 10 than I think inside the top 10. It's kind of my prediction.
And do you think, so I know you said pick 10, so that would be that's the Jets' second pick.
Yeah.
Do you think, I'm trying to see, I know let's see, do you, just to get this off your chest here, do you think it'll be Aiden Hutchinson at 1? Or do you think there's a lot of this different talk about the guy to Georgia?
Yeah.
Thibodeau.
Yeah. So I personally, if I had to bet my own money on it, I definitely would not lay the juice with Aiden Hutchinson. And I think I would probably take Travon Walker, the guy from Georgia, just because I think last time I saw he was like maybe plus 190, plus 200. That seems like a little bit better value for your money because I was listening to another podcast. I can't exactly remember which one it was, but it was talking about the GM for Jacksonville and how his draft tendency, he typically goes for length. And Aiden Hutchinson is going to be probably, by all means, a solid NFL player, maybe even a stud. But Travon Walker just has like that length that no matter how good you are, it's just unteachable. And defense is just so much different in the NFL these days where, the quarterback is such a protected class that you have to have ways that you can affect the play without necessarily getting to the quarterback. And guys that are coming off the edge that have that length that they can get their hands up and bat passes down and just disrupt passing lanes is. I think that's probably where I would put my money is on Travon Walker.
Yeah, and I think it's Trent Baalke is the GM, and am I correct in that was he the GM that he picked Aldon Smith over some of those? It might have been, was JJ Watt in that class? I think he was the one that had picked Aldon Smith, a physical freak coming out of college against a couple other guys that produced more than he did, but they were like, yeah, but look at Aldon Smith. Like day one, he is what he is. Like, again, he had some other problems completely independent of football, but when he did play, he was pretty solid.
It's kind of like maybe Al Davis was always going to take the guy with the fastest 40 time. Like these guys, they do have tendencies. It's crazy, how in depth this coverage gets. But what better way to look at what might go is in guys' draft history. So yeah, I think you're right because I think that podcast had referenced that he that same scenario. So
yeah, and I know any mock draft that excludes trades is a bit like a college party without a barrel of jungle juice, but pick one team that you see trading up and then maybe one team that you see trading down. And I know that you could technically pick one transaction, you hit both, but what do you see like separately, two teams?
I will say, I think Jacksonville should be trading back out of one. They're just so bad. They need help in so many areas that I think that they should trade back. But I think everyone thinks that, or I've seen that out a lot. So they're probably not getting great value for that pick, which might prevent them from moving it because there's not a top end player where it's a sure thing. And, they're going to trade the farm to go up and get X player like we've seen in other years. But I think Jacksonville should trade back. And then I kind of struggled thinking about who might trade up. But what I will say, I don't maybe necessarily know a specific team, but my take is that someone's going to trade up and get Sauce Gardner from Cincinnati if Detroit doesn't take him at 2. I think it's quite possible that Detroit would take him at 2. He's just like tailor-made to be like an alpha Revis Island level corner in the NFL. He's long and he's fast and he's tall. Like he's literally, if you could build like a prototypical corner for today's NFL, it's him. And with how much the NFL is a passing league now, the emphasis on having just good corners has never been more. So I think rather than picking a team, I'll just say that someone is going to trade up and get him.
Yeah, I think with the Jets at 4, there's no way that he gets past. If he gets to them, they have to pick him. I don't know why they wouldn't, especially given that it might be beneficial to them that if no one trades ahead of them, all those teams need, and 1, 2, and 3 do need offensive line help, or a lot of help in every area. So it might be beneficial to them that they've addressed the O-line a little bit last year and a little bit in free agency. So, I mean, the Jets would be licking their chops if they were able to get Sauce at 4. And one that I had seen noted a couple of times, although I disagree with this, if this actually happened, I'd seen talks of Seattle trying to trade up with Carolina at 6. And I guess the thought would be that they were going to pick a quarterback. And that was a bit earlier on when they were saying, is it going to be Carolina picking Pickett or Willis? And then it was like, oh, well, what if Seattle just trades up and picks Pickett or Willis? I don't really see why Seattle would necessarily do that. I really hope also that Carolina does not pick a quarterback, because I don't think any of them are worth it. I mean, I'm a huge Sam Howell fan, but I'm a fan of him as a value of where I think he's going to be picked. Not that I think he's the QB1. And I don't even think it really matters who's the QB1 in this class. I think just in terms of just the differentiation between, there's no generational talents of any of these guys. I don't really know that the gap is so big between 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 that it's really worthwhile to take any, in my opinion, in the top 10. And speaking of quarterbacks, who do you think will be the first drafted, and when do you think they would be picked? And I'll just run a couple of odds here that I'd seen. So Willis is minus 175, Pickett's plus 135, Ritter is plus 1,000, and then Corral is plus 1,600.
Yeah, I think and I use this phrase with Jacob Ridgway a lot when betting on favorites. I think that the juice here is worth the squeeze on Malik Willis. I just don't, with some of the red flags around, I think there's way too many red flags around Kenny Pickett juxtaposed with Malik Willis. And the NFL is trending towards continually more and more mobile quarterbacks. Now, I know Kenny Pickett's definitely a serviceable runner. It's more functional mobility, I think, than it is like, he's not a scrambler who's going to chunk up, 50, 60 yards a game and a touchdown. But, he's athletic in the pocket and can move in the way like maybe a Trevor Lawrence or someone like that. So I would definitely go Malik Willis. His rushing capability is good enough to make him like a day one starter. I think it's interesting to me to hear you say that you don't want Carolina to take him. The only reason that I think they might is, and I'm a terrible Charlotte native or charlatan, however you say it. I don't even know who the GM is for the Panthers off the top of my head, but
Scott Fitter, he actually was in the front office with the Seahawks for a number of years.
How long has he been the GM?
He has been the GM. This is his second. Wait, is this his second year?
Where I'm going with this is essentially I'm trying to figure out if his job is on the line as well as Matt Rule's, because if he's in that same boat, I feel like the Panthers have to take Malik Willis at 6, because if Rule rolls out Sam Darnold or if they trade for like Baker Mayfield or something like that, they're going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL again this year. And Matt Rule will get fired. So if I'm Matt Rule and I have any sort of sway over the GM, situation and can cast my ballot, I'm going to pick Malik Willis and just hope that we catch lightning in a bottle, because the Panthers, which I'm sure you're aware of, do not pick again until pick 137 after pick number 6.
Oh, yeah.
So they're a pretty bad football team with a lot of holes. And but one way I think that they could make a pretty instant impact is get a guy like Malik Willis who can hopefully distribute the ball better to, the weapons of DJ Moore and obviously hopefully a healthy Christian McCaffrey. It could be a good pick. I got a little off topic there. So back to the answer, Malik Willis is where I would definitely go with my money.
And to go back on that topic you were saying, I think it was Fitterer. I want to say this will be his second full season. And I know
that sounds about right because the old GM went to the Giants, right? Gettleman.
Yeah, Gettleman. Jesus.
Yeah.
He loves his hog mollies, is what he likes to say, which sounds wildly inappropriate. But I guess when you're talking about large men playing on an offensive line, I guess it's fine. And actually, Gettleman now, I guess, retired or stepped away. So I guess now it's is it Joe Shane, however you say his name.
Good for the Giants to get out from under that.
I know, right? But yeah, I know with Rule, from what I remember, they were saying that it was going to be kind of he get a good amount of control. And I assume that transferred even once Fitterer was in the room. If that's the case, which based on some of the moves, I do think Fitterer has a bit more influence than what Gettleman did. But if that is the case, I know they also said, which this was hilarious to me, that Matt Rule needs to find, I believe the term was a rock star hire for an offensive coordinator to save his job. And then they got fucking Ben McAdoo. I was irate when I read that. I was like, the dude with the slick back hair that was inappropriately promoted from an OC to the head coach of the Giants and then was just fired like a year or two later. That guy.
Hold on 1 second. If this takes too long, I'm gonna jump ship on it. But me and Jake had a tremendous back and forth regarding Ben McAdoo. I got to get to it because it was so good.
Yeah, he had a pretty terrible introductory interview also.
Yeah, is that the one where he said that Sam Darnold was the starter and then he walked it back like 2 days later?
Yeah, I think it was even in the same interview. He said some version of like, yeah, Darnold's the starter, and then within the same interview later on, he said something like, oh yeah, I shouldn't have said that. Like, did you mean to say that in your head and not out loud? What are you talking about?
So here's how it started. Jake said, I wouldn't trust this guy to flush the urinal. he said, and then it goes on, and I said, this is the guy who takes home a leftover plate from the luncheon meeting at the office. And then I added, he also looks like a guy who's banned from attending local Little League games for harassing the umps. And then he said, and then lastly, I said, last one, he looks like a guy who tries to negotiate the price of Girl Scout cookies when they come to his store. You can cut that if you want, but I had to share that with you.
I want every bit of that because I think Ben McAdoo is a sack of shit, and I don't know how he got hired as the OC. So that's fantastic, and I love every bit of it. But just to steer right back on topic and see a couple more odds here, who do you think is the first wide receiver drafted? And throw the odds out here. It would be Wilson is -110, London is +125, Williams is +330, Olave is +1500, and Burks is +2000.
If I were to go, I'll go value. You know that I like this guy. I would throw a little bit of cheddar on Jameson Williams +330. I think that if he had not torn his ACL, he would definitely be the first wide receiver getting taken. I mean, the dude is he's so freaking fast. And the NFL seemingly more and more these days is like looking for those big plays, like plays that a guy like Tyreek Hill provides. And I'm not saying that anybody is Tyreek Hill, but everyone that watched the SEC championship game and watched Jameson Williams take that slant route 67 yards to the house against the Georgia defense, which is one of the best college defenses that I've seen in maybe my life, but definitely recent memory. And I'm big on who you played in college. I know sometimes these guys can't help, their situation. You go to college where you want to / are wanted. And he started at Ohio State with the wide receiver room of Garrett Wilson, Smith and Jigba. I don't know if I'm saying that right. And then Chris Olave and all these guys transferred to Alabama. And I think some people were like, oh, well, he didn't compete. He didn't even win the starting job in the Ohio State room. I don't care about that because he goes to the SEC and just straight dominates. And the SEC consistently has the top talent, at least by consideration of the NFL's scouting and coaching standards, because every year that conference has the most players taken. and it's usually not even all that close. So to watch him just burn up those defenses all year and then burn up Georgia for like 100 and some change and a touchdown, like sign me up for him. But I think it will end up being probably Garrett Wilson. There's just been a lot of smoke around him going to the Jets at 4. I don't necessarily agree with that logic. If I was the Jets GM, I would not do that. But I think he will probably be the first wide receiver drafted.
And what would you say, whether it be wide receiver, I wouldn't be a running back in the first round, but whatever receiver goes to the Jets, assuming that is going to be what happens at 4, what would you say that does to their perceived value in your mind, at least from a fantasy perspective? Say, regardless of who it is, if it's Wilson, if it's Burks, if it's London, if it's whoever. I
think it kind of tanks them, in all honesty. And it's not necessarily just because it's the Jets and they've been so bad for so long. We didn't see a ton out of wow, I'm just like totally blanking on the BYU quarterback's name that they drafted last year.
You mean Zach Wilson, the stud?
Zach Wilson. Thank you. That's embarrassing. Didn't see a lot out of Zach Wilson last year. And then you also would be inserting this wide receiver who, you know, as much as we like some of this wide receiver talent at the top of this class, like it's not Jamar Chase. It's not Jalen Waddle. I think last year's top end guys were better than this year's top end guys. And so you take a guy that's good, that's first round worthy, and you're plugging him into an offense with a quarterback we don't feel necessarily great about. Corey Davis is a proven solid NFL starter, and they seem to think pretty highly of Elijah Moore as well. So not only are you worried about the quarterback, but you're also looking at a lot of targets potentially going elsewhere. And I don't know. I wouldn't be excited to whoever goes to the Jets. I don't think will probably be the number one fantasy wide receiver taken off the board, you know, in our draft.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And as we talked about this one a little bit before, I think it was yesterday, I believe you have a surprise question for me regarding 2 mystery players, and I would love for you to fire that off.
Yeah, so it does. Unfortunately, it doesn't have to do with the draft. So we're gonna take a little fork off the road here.
Yeah.
But and this is something that you can touch on both as a Panthers fan and a previous partial brief owner of Christian McCaffrey. But I was thinking about it the other day. I think I was having my morning coffee or something, and thinking about the perceived value and the large gap between Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley, and wondering, personally, I don't think it's necessarily justified. Now, I talked about this with Jacob Ridgway, friend of the program, and I looked at the Fantasy Pros composite dynasty rankings, and Christian McCaffrey is the 4th rated composite running back in Dynasty, and Saquon Barkley is the 13th. Now, I don't know how that necessarily equates to value. Like if you wanted to go out and get Christian McCaffrey in your league versus Saquon Barkley, what that necessarily equates to. But both fragile players, both incredible talents, and both built their kind of their fantasy success and real football success on extreme high volume situations. Now, Saquon, Jake's point, which I thought was a valid one, is we haven't seen Saquon do it for longer because, you know, he's been, I think, even the season that he was mostly healthy, his yards per carry dropped by like over a yard. So he had most of his success when Eli Manning was checking down to him like every single play because he couldn't throw the ball more than 25 yards down the field. But anyway, wanted to get your take on that. You know, how you value both of those players, and if you think they're closer than that gap.
I think that at this point, I guess the gap is fair, but it is a tricky thing to think of when they were coming out of college, looking at what their profiles were in their production, and certainly once they got into the league and were, at least in their first season, showing what they could do. It's silly to think of if you just kind of looked at right when they had first started in the NFL a couple years down the road, and you were to say those numbers saying that there was that big of a gap. How on earth is that gap possible? Like, there would have had to have been just a torrential change in what happened with those guys. And I mean, it's crazy to think that with Christian McCaffrey, his fragility, only playing in 10 games in the last 2 seasons, and the fact that him still being valued as the fourth, which I know it helps that we're now only 3 years, I think, removed from his 98, 99% like touches out of the backfield season, 400 plus fantasy points in PPR, like just insane. And even before that, playing every game of the season, doing incredibly well, playing with Cam Newton, which I know obviously helps. It's a very prolific offense before Cam became whatever he is now. But yeah, with Saquon, I don't know if it was a bit of him being the offensive
hater. That's what he is now.
It's exactly what he is. And how dare he? But with Saquon, I think the further we get away from, like, I remember his college profile was absurd, and I guess the further we get away from that, and I mean the more the injuries stack up. Even though I think last season he had a more healthy than not season, if I remember correctly, and at least showed a little bit of what he used to be. But I think until he does tie enough of them together, he might stay just on the outside of the top 10. And for those dynasty managers that are comfortable with getting him at whatever a value is, which that's probably pretty volatile by most people's standards. I think you'd have to have had Saquon for a while and just be sick of the fact that he's not what you wanted him to be able to get a value. I think everybody else would still value him as probably top 10, even if maybe objectively other people are maybe seeing him just on the outside of that.
Yeah, I think that was, to kind of summarize my point, was just if I was, and this is again kind of ironic considering that I traded for Christian McCaffrey, shipped him to you, and now you've since shipped him on. But I think for my value, if I was looking at getting one or the other, I would rather take the discount and take Saquon right now than invest the capital to get Christian McCaffrey, because yes, I do believe in my heart of hearts that Christian McCaffrey is the better player in a better situation. But it's just, you just have to give up a lot more to get him. And I'm not positive that, what am I trying to say? That the value you'd have to give up to get him covers that delta, because they're both at risk for going down at any given time.
Yeah. I mean, and despite Christian McCaffrey reaching the heights that he did, I don't even think dynasty managers want him to get to that again, because they're like, all right, I can hope I have him for that one season, because he's just going to continue to get injured. And I don't really think, in what the offenses he is now, I don't think he's going to be used in that way at this point. I mean, the amount of money that they threw at him is absurd. And I understand, like, you threw that money at him, you got to use him. But they also probably see the long term of like, all right, I mean, they're not going to make the playoffs this year, but all right, if we want to have him as just a weapon that almost no one else has anything close to in the backfield, we need to use him, make sure we can win, but also utilize him to be healthy for the playoffs.
Right.
I know it's not going to happen anytime soon, but at least for the life of the contract, I think he'll be 28, 29, I think, when it's up. Jesus. But it hasn't started off too hot with that extension, but I think this season should turn around for him, and hopefully for Saquon as well, though I know in the offseason there's a lot of the talk of him possibly being traded, but I think that's just part of a whole new regime coming in, a new GM, a new coach, and I mean, he's valuable, so that's why they thought they could trade him.
Yeah, I think they're gonna, if they want to prolong him and have him live to see the end of that contract, he's gonna have to get more of the Austin Eckler treatment than he is, the all-purpose back treatment. I always think of, too, I'm not trying to besmirch Christian McCaffrey's name or make Danny Woodhead into more than he was, but I could see, I mean, Danny Woodhead lasted a long time, but they, kind of created a specific role for him. And that's more like what I see as he gets older and older, is they're just going to have to start using him a little bit more thoughtfully.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just hearing you say besmirched. I was watching that episode yesterday. You totally besmirched me.
I demand satisfaction.
And that works out too, because this transition fits well with this. So, as Dennis Reynolds would say, it's all about the implication. And these are the fantasy implications. So, is there a first-round player that you think has the most to gain or lose based on draft position? We may have already kind of touched on that when we were talking about what receiver goes to the Jets. But would that be your biggest thing of like whatever weapon goes to the Jets in the first round is kind of the one that may lose the most?
Yeah, it's funny. We kind of stumbled our way onto that. That's actually not the one that I wrote down. But I do, after talking about it, I do definitely think that a wide receiver that would go to them, it would kind of tank their value. The one I wrote down was Malik Willis. And the only reason I say that is because there has been some chatter potentially with Detroit being interested in him at number 2. Not trying to hurt any Lions fans' feelings out there or anything, but Detroit's, again, it's like the New York Jets. It's just one of those franchises that, like, when a player goes there, you just kind of lose excitement because they've been bad for so long. I mean, they couldn't get it done with Matt Stafford. Matt Stafford leaves and, goes and wins the Super Bowl the first year he's outside of Detroit. They pushed Barry Sanders into retirement early. They pushed Calvin Johnson into retirement early. Like, so if Malik Willis goes to Detroit, that's bad for Malik Willis. But he goes potentially to Carolina at 6. He walks into an offense that already has some really good young weapons, and DJ Moore and Christian McCaffrey. And same thing, if he falls a bit and goes to Pittsburgh, I mean, that totally changes their outlook. And I think potentially, I wouldn't say tanks Malik Willis's value, but definitely gives me pause about taking him at the 101 because they do have Mitchell Trubisky. And I think we've seen who Mitchell Trubisky is, but we've also seen who Matt Nagy is without Mitchell Trubisky. So are we that positive that Mitch Trubisky can't be like a poor man's Josh Allen or definitely better than we saw in Chicago? So I think that we would definitely get a quarterback battle between Malik Willis and Mitch Trubisky in Pittsburgh. I don't think he'd walk right into having that starting job. So that was the main reason that I put him as the most to gain or lose, because it's like bad team with some weapons, and bad team in Detroit, bad team with some weapons in Carolina, good team in Pittsburgh, but wouldn't necessarily be the guaranteed starter.
Yeah, what do you? I don't know if we've actually talked about this specifically. What do you think of the Trubisky ad in Pittsburgh in terms of? I guess he's viewed as the bridge. I think he's even been told we may go quarterback. We'll see what we can do. And I think he's just kind of like, okay. I mean, you're giving me a shot, and I appreciate it. But do you think that there's any hope of that's going to turn into somewhat of like a Tannehill situation of he got brought in to Tennessee? I'm not saying that he was brought in to be a bridge, but when he was brought in, I don't remember the thought being you're the de facto starter, come in, you're starting day one. But he slid in, and he's had a stranglehold on the job ever since.
Yeah, you're exactly right, because Titans still had Marcus Mariota, and who was perennially banged up and or out hurt. So it was a high-end backup security policy. And I think that's a great comparison, because I think that's really exactly what the Steelers are doing here, because there is something to be said for having a high-quality backup. We've seen a lot of teams that invested in guys like Nick Foles and Chase Daniel that can win football games, because the likelihood, especially now that we're on a 17-game season, that you're going to make it through a full season with your quarterback is unlikely. And say what you will about Mitch Trubisky, but he's at very least like a top 10 backup quarterback. And I picked him up towards the end of the free agent period last year in our league, because I was kind of mapping out how many teams it looked like were going to need a quarterback. And I was like, this guy he's going to get a chance to start again. And I didn't necessarily think that it was going to be Pittsburgh, but I kind of saw maybe when Tom Brady retired, maybe the Bucs were going to pick him up, or he might head out to like the Texans or something like that. No disrespect to Davis Mills, of course.
Don't put that hate on me.
But I think he kind of got that show me deal. It's like, I think it's somewhere around 8 to 10 million, but then if he wins the starting job, it's more like 14 to 16 or something. So, as much as I like to knock the guy because he played a horrible game against Virginia Tech in a hurricane, and I like to make fun of him for that, I do think that he's probably a bit better than he's cast in the public eye because of how bad things got in Chicago. And I don't think it was necessarily all his fault.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how Chicago looks this year with I know they didn't go with an offensive-minded head coach, but from the games that I saw with Fields, I think it looked like Fields was just kind of like, I'm doing what you're telling me to do, but I don't like it, and it's not going well. but he didn't want to be defined and not do what they were asking him to do. So a lot of times it just seemed like on the bench, he was just like, sure enough, I got sacked yet another time. I don't know what you want me to do. But so you got the Titans, your team with the pick 26. So what do you want or think they're going to do?
What I want them to do is trade up into. I want Jamison Williams to fall into the teens, and if he hits like 15 and he hasn't been drafted, which I think is probably unlikely, I think the Titans should make an aggressive move and go get him. I just think of a wide receiver core of hopefully of AJ Brown if they can figure out this contract situation. I know the Titans GM John Robinson said there were some trade rumors swirling around that said we're not trading AJ Brown, which made me feel a lot better because I was seeing some rumors of AJ Brown for Debo, and I was probably going to set a jersey on fire if that happened because I'm an AJ Brown stan. I think that he's fit to blow like even more than he has already. I think he's a freaking stud. But having him, Bobby Trees on the other side, and then Jamison Williams, a speedster as well. I think you could probably move Robert Woods into like a big slot role at that point, and then stretch the field with AJ Brown, and then anything to pull guys out of the box so that King Henry can have room to plow. But I think realistically, that's my dream scenario. I think realistically, a guy like Jahan Dotson would be a good pick. He'll probably be available at the end of the first round. Somebody with some speed is what I'm hoping for at wide receiver that can help stretch the field. But my wild card is I think that, and I texted you about this, I think there's a small chance that depending on how the first round goes, that they could look at taking someone like Matt Corral or Desmond Ridder and walking away from Ryan Tannehill after this year. And I don't say that because Ryan Tannehill has been anything other than, a solid top 15 type player, at times even better than that. And I'm not saying it because he threw 3 picks in the first playoff game and potentially cost us the win. It's just the Titans would save $18 million by cutting him after next year. He'll be 35 before the start of the 2023 season. So we've seen NFL teams now have a lot of success with drafting getting rookie quarterbacks on these cheaper deals and then having the money to spend elsewhere. And we've seen a lot of teams get into cap trouble on the other end, like the Chiefs, and they have to ship out high-end talent because they can't afford it because they're paying their quarterback like $1 gazillion. It's happening in Dallas right now. I mean, I know we got Dak over there in the corner. I don't know if you can see him.
Yeah,
it's a little dark, but no disrespect to Dak, but he deserved his money. So I could see them maybe going quarterback as well, but I think more realistically, probably a receiver like Jahan Dotson would be a good pick.
Yeah, I like that. And switching to another type of draft, and we'll finish up with the last question here. You are currently the holder of the 101 in the League of Extraordinary Degenerates. And do you want to go ahead and lock that pick in now? Are you really hoping for, if landing spot does that, would you say there's someone you feel like a couple people where it's like it would truly dictate based on landing spot that could bump someone from like your second to your first or your third to your first option?
Yeah, definitely. I will tentatively lock in Malik Willis as the 101 if he goes to Carolina at 6. Or let me just say, if he goes in the top 10, like if someone were to trade up and get him, I'd be hard pressed not to take him at that point. I really kind of want him to go to Carolina. One, because obviously with me living in Charlotte, I think it'd be fun to have the starting quarterback of the hometown team here. And be a little bit more invested in the Panthers since, I do watch the Panthers, but, they just haven't been that good. So it would be nice it would be fun to have the starting quarterback on my Dynasty team for the Panthers and be excited about that.
Yeah.
But the other scenario that I've been toying around with is it's gonna depend on day 2. Where we see the first running back go off the board. I think I've made it no secret that I'm a big Breece Hall fan. I think he's the type of talent that in other years would probably have been like a top 10 pick, but teams just shy away from doing that with running backs anymore. So depending on where he lands, I could see myself talking myself into him at the 101, especially if one of these quarterbacks, I can't say this too loud because my wife is a Mississippi State grad and Matt Corral went to Ole Miss, but I'm a big fan of Matt Corral's game. So if he were to go to the Titans, I could potentially see myself going like wide receiver or running back at number 1 and then snagging him like with my other first round pick or a early second to just someone I can stash. But right now I would lock in Malik Willis if he goes into what looks like a direct starter's role for sure.
He is a prolific talent. I know I watched the Ole Miss game live, and I know that it's a different level of talent of going from Liberty and who they're traditionally playing, some colleges that I didn't know existed, to then go in and play a team such as Ole Miss, which even when they played them, I think each offense was a bit depleted. I know Corral, I think, was battling an ankle injury at the time. But I know that was a tough one to watch, but also I'm hoping is watching Willis in those moments when he kind of tried to do it all. And he has the physical tools to do almost anything. So I think he, in his mind, thought he could indeed do it all. And maybe the hope is if he goes to a stable enough situation, he can do it all when he has to and kind of go off platform and off script. But if he's given a good offensive mind and a good offensive line and some good weapons, as I'm sure it's probably the case with any quarterback going into the draft, and I think that he could be a game breaking talent. But he worries me that he could be the exact opposite. But again, in any situation, if it's the quarterback that doesn't go to a good enough scheme that can help kind of prop up and elevate whatever their talents are and maybe limit their weaknesses, probably the case with any of those guys. So, as this outro here, guest gets the last word. This could be a plug. This could be parting words. This could be general advice, life advice. This could be fantasy advice. This could be a favorite quote, like Michael Scott quoting Wayne Gretzky. Whatever you got, let me have it.
I got 2 shout outs. Wanted to shout out Virginia Tech baseball. They're in the top 10 right now, number 8 in the country. And they went up, I don't know if you saw this, but they played in Fenway Park on Saturday against Boston College. Got the dub. Really cool experience, I'm sure, for those guys. I can't remember the one player's name, but he went yard in Fenway, which I can't imagine how cool of that guy will never forget that as long as he lives. Wasn't over the green monster. He went over the right field wall, but still to hit a home run in Fenway. I'm not sure if that guy has pro prospects or not, but just the odds that you get to do that in your life are insane. So wanted to shout that out. And then my boy, special place in my heart, Christian Pulisic, favorite player on my favorite team, scored the game winner in the 90th minute today against West Ham. Was super pumped for him. Amazing moment. So those are my 2 shout outs.
I love it. And just to let you know, Marley did get me FIFA yesterday.
There you go.
I'm digging into it.
I'll see you on the sticks. Let me know when you want to play. When you get up to par.
That's right. I'll have to download it, and I'll have to get not shitty at it. But we'll see how it goes.
That's my game, so you gotta come correct.
Absolutely. Or I'm going to play in your team where we can whoop everybody else's ass. We'll go.
There we go. We can do that too.
Right on. Well, I appreciate it, brother. Looking forward to seeing what happens in the draft, and we'll catch up after.
Likewise. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.